The challenge for the Allies was immense. The Atlantic is vast, stretching thousands of miles from the ports of North America to the British Isles, with treacherous weather, unpredictable currents, and, above all, the ever-present menace of the U-boats. Convoys of merchant ships, often slow-moving and lightly armed, became tempting targets. Protecting them required not only warships but also coordination, intelligence, and, increasingly, technological innovation. The opening months of the war saw the Allies relying on established naval doctrines, with warships escorting convoys and hunting for enemy surface raiders. The Royal Navy's fleet, built and trained for battleship engagements, adapted to its new role as the shield and sword of the Atlantic convoys. The first organized Atlantic convoy set sail after the outbreak of hostilities, with the convoy system implemented immediately following the declaration of war on September 3, 1939. Yet this transition was far from seamless. The U-boat threat was both pervasive and elusive. German submarines could operate across vast swaths of the ocean, slipping through gaps in Allied defenses and striking with little warning. At its core, the convoy system was a strategy born of necessity, but tempered by experience, or, as some historians have noted, by a lack of it. After the First World War, the lessons of convoy defense were clear. Grouping merchant ships under the protection of warship escorts dramatically reduced losses to enemy submarines. Yet, as the world slid into conflict once more, those hard-won lessons were not immediately or fully embraced. The reasons varied. Some naval leaders clung to old doctrines, doubting that convoys could be effectively escorted across such vast waters with limited resources. Others underestimated how quickly submarine technology and tactics had advanced. Only as losses mounted, when the harsh arithmetic of tonnage sunk began to threaten Britain's very survival, did the convoy system emerge as the backbone of Allied defense. Following the official outbreak of hostilities on September 3, 1939, the convoy system was implemented immediately. The first organized Atlantic convoy set sail after hostilities began, marking the beginning of a new phase in maritime warfare. The concept was simple: gather merchant ships into tight formations and surround them with layers of protection: destroyers, corvettes, armed trawlers, and, when possible, aircraft overhead. The logic was as much mathematical as tactical. A scattered fleet of single ships offered a broad, tempting target for roaming U-boats. A convoy, though large and ponderous, concentrated risk and maximized the value of scarce escorts. Still, the early convoys were vulnerable. The Allies had only a handful of ships equipped for anti-submarine warfare, and aircraft coverage was limited by the sheer size of the Atlantic. For the German submarine force, led by Admiral Karl Dönitz, these early months presented an opportunity. By the early months of 1943, the Atlantic had become a proving ground for innovation, coordination, and resilience. The Allies, battered by years of attrition, stood at a crossroads. Their lifeline to North America was fraying under the relentless assault of German U-boats, which prowled the ocean depths and surface with increasing sophistication. Yet, this very period marked the beginning of a dramatic reversal, a turning of the tide that would ultimately secure Allied victory in the Atlantic and reshape the logistics of global warfare. This transformation was found not only in the hulls of ships or the steel of guns, but in the minds of those who devised strategy and the hands of those who crafted technology. Admiral Horton, whose name would become synonymous with operational brilliance, brought a new philosophy to the fight. He believed victory would not be won in scattered engagements, but through the concentration of force in decisive areas, relentless offensive action, and, crucially, cooperation among the various Allied navies. Every escort group and support squadron had to function as part of a larger organism, sharing information and resources, guided by the principle of economy, never risking a ship or a sailor unless it could tip the balance. This was not just theory. The Allies put these ideas into practice by refining how their convoys were protected and where their ships hunted. Escort groups, instead of spreading thinly across the ocean, converged in areas of greatest threat, swarming to meet wolf packs with a ferocity that had once belonged to the U-boats alone. Offensive sweeps, once rare, became more common as intelligence and firepower allowed Allied ships to take the fight to the enemy. The result was a profound shift in morale and outcomes. The hunted became the hunters. As the Allies improved their tactics, the Germans responded with new measures of their own. In the first half of 1943, U-boats were retrofitted for greater survivability on the surface, bristling with enhanced anti-aircraft armament. The once sleek Predators now carried an 88mm gun forward and a 20mm cannon mounted on the bridge, especially among the 500-ton class. These modifications were an attempt to counter the growing threat from the air, as Allied aircraft began to patrol the skies above the convoys with increasing frequency. But even these adaptations could not halt the tide of technological disruption. The Allies had seized upon the idea that victory in the Atlantic would go to those who could see first and strike first. Nowhere was this clearer than in the rapid evolution and deployment of radar technology. Radar had already proven itself as a disruptive force in naval warfare, much as the maritime propeller had in an earlier era. But it was the arrival of microwave radar that truly changed the game. This new generation of radar could detect the faintest silhouette of a U-boat's conning tower on the horizon, even in thick fog or the dead of night. The impact was immediate and profound. Allied ships and aircraft, now equipped with these compact, powerful radars, could sweep the ocean's surface for hidden threats. Convoys that once sailed blind now moved with the confidence that unseen eyes were always watching. The result was a dramatic reduction in the surprise attacks that had so often spelled disaster for Allied shipping. Where once a sudden torpedo had meant doom for merchantmen, now U-boats found themselves exposed and vulnerable, forced to dive or face destruction from above and below. This technological leap was matched by another secret weapon not forged of steel or electronics, but of intellect and perseverance. Deep within the labyrinthine halls of Allied intelligence, the Ultra program was quietly reshaping the course of the campaign. By breaking into the encrypted world of Enigma, Ultra provided a steady stream of information that allowed Allied commanders to anticipate German moves with uncanny precision. While the details of Ultra's operations would remain secret for decades, its effect was unmistakable. Convoys could be rerouted away from danger, U-boat concentrations could be avoided or attacked, and the rhythm of the enemy's campaign could be disrupted at critical moments. The interplay between ultra-intelligence and operational command meant that every technological and tactical advantage was multiplied. As the Allies sharpened their tools of war, the broader machinery of logistics and supply came into its own. The importance of the Atlantic sea lanes had always been clear, but now, with the tide turning, the full potential of Allied industrial might could be brought to bear. Steam-powered merchantmen, long a symbol of modernity, provided the backbone of transatlantic logistics. These ships, together with the sprawling reach of the railways on both sides of the ocean, enabled the rapid movement and concentration of men and materiel on an unprecedented scale. The ability to deliver tanks, trucks, ammunition, and food across thousands of miles of hostile ocean was no longer a hope, but a reality. This logistical revolution reached its peak in the months following the securing of the Atlantic. The Red Ball Express, launched in 1944, stands as a testament to what efficient supply chains could achieve. With the Atlantic routes finally secure from the worst depredations of the U-boats, convoys delivered their precious cargoes to European ports, where fleets of trucks and trains carried them forward to the advancing armies. The Red Ball Express, a vast and ceaseless flow of vehicles, ensured that Allied divisions pressing across France and into Germany never lacked for fuel, ammunition, or food. It was the final link in a chain stretching from American factories and Canadian granaries to the shattered villages of Normandy and beyond. The cumulative effect of these changes was felt not only in the statistics of tonnage lost and U-boats sunk, but in the very character of the campaign itself. By early 1943, British imports had fallen to a third less than their pre-war levels, a stark figure that threatened the very survival of the British war effort. The margin for error was razor thin. Yet, as new radar sets came into service, as ultra-intelligence grew ever more refined, and as operational strategies matured under commanders like Horton, the grim tide began to recede. Shipping losses, once catastrophic, began to fall. U-boat sinkings mounted. The wolf packs, so recently the terror of the Atlantic, found themselves harried and hunted, their ranks thinned by depth charge and shell fire. Still, the Allies could not afford to relax. The specter of escalation loomed large in every strategic calculation. The need for escalation control remained ever present, a delicate balancing act to ensure that measures taken in the Atlantic did not provoke unintended consequences elsewhere. Allied leaders weighed each offensive sweep, each new deployment of technology, with an eye toward avoiding actions that might spiral into broader conflict or shift the focus of the enemy's efforts. This prudence shaped not only the tempo of the campaign but also its ultimate outcome, as the Allies sought victory without courting disaster. By war's end, the transformation was complete. The Allied navies, once stretched thin and battered by losses, had become masters of the Atlantic. They could deliver strategic strikes at will, their fleets ranging across the ocean in pursuit of the last remnants of the U-boat threat. The once constant peril of starvation and isolation for Britain and her allies had been replaced by a sense of secure, unbroken connection, a highway across the sea that would fuel the liberation of Europe. Looking back, it is clear that the Battle of the Atlantic was not won by any single innovation or tactic, but by the relentless adaptation and integration of many. The German U-boats, for all their menace and technical ingenuity, found themselves outpaced by a coalition that learned, cooperated, and improvised on a global scale. The Allies' embrace of disruptive technologies, from radar to cryptanalysis, coupled with inspired operational leadership and the harnessing of industrial logistics, allowed them to seize the initiative and hold it. The strategic outcomes of this victory were felt far beyond the waters themselves. Securing the Atlantic meant securing the future of Allied operations on the European continent. Every soldier who landed on the beaches of Normandy, every tank that rolled across the fields of France, owed its presence in part to the men and women who had fought to keep the sea lanes open. The Red Ball Express and the vast networks of supply that followed were made possible by the hard-won control of the ocean. The legacy of the Battle of the Atlantic endures not only in the lessons of military history, but in the very nature of modern warfare and logistics. It demonstrated that victory in a global conflict depended not merely on strength at the point of contact, but on the ability to innovate, to share information, and to adapt strategy in the face of changing threats. The struggle for the Atlantic was, in many ways, a crucible in which the future of coalition warfare, technological adaptation, and strategic logistics was forged. As the war moved into its final phases, the Atlantic no longer haunted the dreams of Allied leaders as it once had. The tide had turned, not by accident or luck, but by the tireless efforts of those who refused to accept defeat. Those who watched the horizon, listened for enemy transmissions, and labored night and day to ensure that the ships would get through. In that victory, the Allies found not just the means to liberate a continent, but the blueprint for confronting the challenges of a new and uncertain world.